Hello, you filthy hobbit. The average engineer back here again today. I want to talk about a probably boring topic, but an important topic called raw data ingestion. I wrote a Substack article recently called Raw Data Ingestion in the Lakehouse World, and it just kind of explored the idea of what does it mean to do raw data ingestion to different people, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. I was kind of surprised about the response I had to this article. I mean, it seems kind of boring on the surface, but apparently people do have opinions and people do things different ways when you just ask them what is raw data ingestion and data engineering context, what does that mean, how should you do it, and there's certain nuances that people can't agree about. I just want to cover a few of those today. I did make the mistake of asking my LinkedIn network about raw data staging. I asked them, when loading data into raw or staging tables in a lakehouse or data warehouse, do you transform anything, data types, anything else, schema, or is it just raw untouched? And it had, like, last time I looked, it had way over 30 comments, and it's probably still going. I'm ignoring it now, but it's just people have an opinion on it, and it sounds straightforward. It's a big part of what data engineers do, and there's a lot of nuance behind how should I ingest raw data into my storage system. I mean, some of the answers are all the way from just put it into Parquet with data types and schema enforcement. Some people saying we just do everything as string data types and we'll worry about stuff later. Some people argue that, maybe date times or things for partitioning maybe, and leave everything else raw. It's pretty interesting. The responses were all across the board in the comments, meaning people don't approach this problem the same way. I think there's two main things when it comes to raw data staging: ingesting data into a system that needs traceability for that data. Number one is you need to have as close to an untouched version or exact raw copy of the data as possible. So you always need to be able to kind of go back in time, look at what happened. Things change, files change, people don't tell you, data changes. And just for general troubleshooting, you need to be able to go back in time and say, what did this data look like in its raw form? Because if you can't answer that question, things can get pretty hairy when bugs start showing up or problems start popping up somewhere. It's hard to know what went wrong where. Also, another big problem with raw data ingestion is efficient data storage. You don't want too many copies of the same data. Data sizes can grow. Honestly, if you talk to a lot of people, for example, on AWS, S3 storage costs can end up being a huge portion of the bill, so it's not a joke. Data storage is important. How many times you store that data, etc. But at the same time, when you're talking about big data sets, you have to have efficient partitioning and clustering of that data, and many times that includes your staging data sets being partitioned and clustered, and that is going to require probably some touching of that raw data, some addition to that raw data that allows it, maybe year, month, day. If you're partitioning or clustering by time series, right, you're going to have to get it maybe a column into a date format or something, if that makes sense. One thing that's become very popular because of Databricks is this whole Medallion architecture. It's pretty interesting. We can just use that as a quick use case. If you go on the Databricks website, search Medallion architecture, you'll get a bunch of stuff. They have a lot of content around that. They have some, bronze, silver, gold type of layout of data. So bronze being raw ingestion, silver being sort of filtered clean, whatever, and then gold being gold, business level, ready to go data aggregates. And it's interesting because when you read Databricks documentation about Medallion architecture, they say, what is the bronze? They say it's a landing zone for raw data, no schema needed. That's an interesting statement because in their system we're talking about Delta Lake, which by default has a schema, so there is schema enforcement. I don't know if they mean by all strings, default kind of stuff like that. When you're bringing that in, I'm not sure totally what they mean. It just goes to show you that this is a nuanced topic, and there's not a lot of consensus around how to bring in raw staging data. Although they did have a good quote, Databricks said, the bronze layer is where we land all the data from external source systems. The table structure in this layer's compromise corresponds to the source table or data structure as is, along with any additional metadata or columns that need to be loaded for that date, time, processing ID, etc. And I actually agree with this statement from Databricks. I believe the best way to ingest raw staging data into your data warehouse, data lake, lakehouse, etc., is to leave it as is. So In many cases, it would be a string, although there could be data types attached if you're talking about dumps from database systems like Postgres or something along that nature. I think probably the most important tool is to remember not to touch that data, or to touch it as least as possible. But what a lot of people forget is the addition of metadata to that. So, maybe it's the source file name, timestamps, things like that allow it to be partitioned. Just extra metadata. It could be the file name, the location in, say, S3 of that raw file, for example. Stuff like that, metadata to be added on to that raw data, but without touching that raw data. That's all I really had on that topic. Just a quick one. I'd be interested to know how you guys deal with your raw data. Let me know in the comments.